My son sat beside the county attorney, calmly testifying that I was no longer capable of living in my own home. I watched him turn our most private conversations into legal weapons, trying to convince a judge to strip away my rights for my own protection. In that cold hearing room, the boy I had spent a lifetime raising became the star witness trying to take away my freedom. Before we continue and find out how it all began, please subscribe and leave a like. We'd truly love to read your comments below. I noticed the paperwork first. It sat on Michael's kitchen counter when I stopped by Thursday morning, half hidden under a grocery receipt and a coffee-stained mug. The letterhead read Cedar Heights Senior Living. Bold letters printed across cream paper that looked expensive and deliberate. I picked it up before I could stop myself, my hands already trembling at the formal language. Application for residential assessment. My name appeared 3 times on the first page alone, but my signature was nowhere to be found. Michael walked in from the hallway, still buttoning his shirt for work. He saw me holding the paper and his expression shifted, something practiced sliding into place. "Mom, I was going to talk to you about that." His voice carried the careful tone I had learned to recognize over the past few months, the one that meant decisions had already been made. "It is just preliminary, nothing definite. Diane suggested we explore options." Diane? The social worker from the county office who had started calling 6 weeks ago asking questions about my medications, my driving, whether I remembered to eat regular meals. I had answered honestly because I believed honesty protected you. Now I understood it had only given them ammunition. "You filled this out without telling me," I said, setting the paper down carefully so my shaking would not show. "This is about me moving into a facility." He sighed. The sound weighted with what he probably thought was patience. "We need to be realistic. You are 66. The stairs in your apartment are not safe. You forgot to take your blood pressure medication twice last month. What if something happens and no one is there?" Each reason landed like a stone. Things I had mentioned casually in conversations I thought were just conversations. I had not realized they were being cataloged, building a case I would have to defend against. I left his house without finishing the coffee he offered, driving the 7 miles back to my apartment with my knuckles white against the steering wheel. The stairs he mentioned were only 12 steps, worn wood I had climbed for 8 years without incident. Inside, everything looked the same. My books stacked beside the reading chair. Photographs of Michael at various ages covering the mantel. It was the life I had built after his father died, small but mine. I sat at the kitchen table and forced myself to breathe evenly, to think past the panic rising in my chest. The medication he referenced was one prescription among 5 I managed daily, organized in a plastic container marked with the days of the week. Twice I had refilled a compartment I thought was empty, discovering I had already taken that dose. Human error, not cognitive decline. But framed the right way, even ordinary mistakes became evidence of incapacity. I pulled out the notebook I used for grocery lists and started writing. Dates, conversations, who said what and when. If they were building a case, I needed to build my own. That evening, Michael called. "I am sorry if I upset you this morning. I know this is hard to think about, but Diane explained that planning ahead is better than waiting for a crisis. Cedar Heights has a great reputation. We should at least tour it together." His words were reasonable, the kind that made you feel unreasonable for objecting. I told him I would think about it and ended the call before he could press further. Sleep came in fragments that night, interrupted by thoughts that spiraled into worst scenarios. Moving into Cedar Heights meant giving up my apartment, my independence, the small freedoms that defined my days. It meant accepting that others knew better than I did what my life should look like. I had spent decades raising Michael, putting his needs first, believing that self-sacrifice built closeness. Now that closeness felt like a trap closing around me. Friday morning brought an email from Diane, carbon copied to Michael. Following up on our conversation about residential options for Eleanor, I have scheduled a preliminary assessment at Cedar Heights for Monday at 10 a.m. Please confirm attendance. I stared at the screen, rereading the sentence 3 times. Our conversation. I had never spoken to Diane about residential options. Every interaction had been framed as routine check-ins. Wellness monitoring required by some program I had never signed up for but could not remember refusing. I called the county office, navigating automated menus until I reached a human voice. I am calling about Diane Fletcher. She scheduled an assessment I did not request. The receptionist put me on hold, cheerful music playing for 6 minutes before transferring me to voicemail. I left a message that probably sounded angrier than I intended, my voice shaking with frustration I could not quite control. Michael texted an hour later. Diane said you called upset. Mom, we are trying to help. Please do not make this harder than it needs to be. The phrasing stung. Making this harder suggested I was the obstacle, the problem to be managed. I responded that I wanted to discuss this in person, privately, without Diane. He replied after a long pause. Okay. Sunday afternoon at my place, we will talk. Sunday arrived gray and cold. November rain pattering against my windshield as I drove to Michael's house. He lived in a newer development 15 miles outside Portland, 3-bedroom colonial with a yard he rarely maintained. Inside, he had coffee ready, cookies arranged on a plate like we were having a pleasant visit. I sat at his dining table and he settled across from me, hands folded in what I recognized as his serious conversation posture. I need you to understand something, I started before he could frame the discussion his way. I did not ask for an assessment. I did not agree to move anywhere. These decisions are being made as if I do not have a say. My voice held steady, which felt like a small victory. I know you think you are helping, but this feels like you are deciding my life without me. He nodded slowly. The gesture meant to convey understanding without actually conceding anything. I hear you, but you have to see it from my perspective. What if you fall on those stairs? What if you have a medical emergency and no one finds you for days? I cannot stop worrying. Diane said facilities like Cedar Heights provide safety and community. You would not have to worry about cooking or cleaning. There are activities. Other people your age. Other people your age. The phrase reduced me to a demographic, a category of problems requiring institutional solutions. I am not struggling, I said, keeping my tone measured. I manage my home. I take my medications. I have friends. Just because I am 66 does not mean I need to be warehoused. The word slipped out harsher than I intended, but it captured what Cedar Heights represented to me. A place where people went to wait. Michael's expression tightened. That is not fair. These places are not warehouses. They are communities designed for seniors who need support. And whether you want to admit it or not, you do need support. You are alone. You have no backup plan. What happens when you cannot drive anymore or when the stairs really do become dangerous? I am trying to plan ahead so we do not end up in a crisis. The argument circled, neither of us yielding ground. He believed he was protecting me. I believed he was erasing me. Both things were probably true, which made finding resolution impossible. We agreed finally that I would attend Monday's assessment, not as commitment but as information gathering. It felt like a concession I should not have made, but refusal would have escalated the conflict in ways I was not ready to handle. Monday morning, I dressed carefully in clothes that broadcast competence. Pressed slacks, clean sweater, minimal jewelry. I wanted to look capable, someone who did not need institutional care. Michael picked me up at 9:30, driving us to Cedar Heights in a silence that felt heavy with unspoken tensions. The facility sat on landscaped grounds outside the city, modern building designed to look residential rather than clinical. Inside smelled of floor polish and something floral I could not identify. Diane met us in the lobby, her professional smile already in place. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with the kind of careful appearance that suggested everything about her was managed for effect. "Eleanor, thank you for coming. I know this can feel overwhelming. Let me show you around and we can talk about what Cedar Heights offers." She guided us down carpeted hallways, pointing out common areas and amenities as if we were touring a hotel rather than a place people lived because they had run out of other options. The consultation room was small and windowless, furnished with a desk and 3 chairs arranged to make you feel like you were being interviewed. Diane sat behind the desk, opening a folder with my name on it. "I have been reviewing your situation with Michael. Based on our conversations and the information he provided, I believe Cedar Heights could be a good fit. You would have your own studio apartment, access to meals and activities, and staff available 24/7 if you need assistance." I interrupted before she could continue. "What information did Michael provide?" The question came out sharper than professional courtesy probably allowed, but I was tired of being discussed in third person. "Because I have not provided any information. I did not ask for this assessment." Diane's smile held, though something flickered behind it. "Michael contacted us out of concern for your well-being. As your family, he is entitled to explore care options on your behalf. Our assessment process helps determine appropriate levels of support." Her language was smooth, bureaucratic, designed to make this sound collaborative when it was anything but. The assessment itself was a series of questions disguised as conversation. Could I describe my typical day? Did I have any difficulty with stairs, cooking, managing finances? How often did I see other people? Each question felt like a test with right answers I was supposed to know, but somehow kept missing. I answered honestly, which I realized halfway through was probably a mistake. Honesty gave them data points to justify conclusions they had already reached. An hour later, we left with pamphlets and a follow-up appointment scheduled for the following week. In Michael's car, I stared out the window at rain-slicked streets, feeling something harden inside me. They were moving forward with or without my cooperation. The assessment was not exploration, it was documentation. Every reasonable question had been designed to build a file that justified what they wanted to do. Back at my apartment, I spread the Cedar Heights materials across my kitchen table. Glossy brochures showing smiling seniors engaged in activities that looked staged. Pricing information that made my stomach drop. Monthly fees I could not afford without selling my apartment and liquidating what little savings I had. Application forms that required medical records, financial disclosure, emergency contacts who would be notified of placement decisions. This was not care. This was processing. I called my friend Rita, someone I had known since Michael was in elementary school. She listened while I explained the situation, her silence on the other end more supportive than advice would have been. "What do you want to do?" she asked finally. "Not what Michael wants or what Diane thinks you should do. What do you actually want?" The question stopped me. I had been so focused on resisting what was being done to me that I had not articulated what I wanted instead. "I want to stay here," I said slowly, the words clarifying as I spoke them. "I want to make my own decisions. I want to stop being treated like I am incapable just because I am 66 and alone." Saying it out loud made it real, a position I could no longer retreat from without losing something essential. Rita was quiet for a moment. "Then you need to make that clear. Not asking, not negotiating. Just stating what you will and will not accept. They can only push you as far as you let them." Her words were simple, but they landed with weight. I had been letting them push because I did not want conflict. did not want to be difficult, did not want to damage my relationship with Michael. But staying silent was damaging me, eroding the person I still was beneath their concerns and assumptions. That night I drafted an email to Diane, copying Michael. I appreciate your time Monday, but I need to clarify my position. I am not applying for residential placement at Cedar Heights. I am capable of living independently and intend to continue doing so. Please do not schedule further assessments without my explicit request. I read it 5 times before hitting send, my finger hovering over the button as if the email itself was irrevocable. Then I sent it, and the relief that followed was complicated by dread of what would come next. Michael called within an hour of my email, his voice tight with controlled frustration. "Mom, what are you doing? Diane is trying to help. Why are you fighting this?" I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, watching rain streak the window. "I am not fighting," I said carefully. "I am clarifying my position. You have been making decisions about my life without asking me. That has to stop." He exhaled sharply, the sound carrying more than words. "You do not understand how this works. Diane is a professional. She sees situations like yours all the time. She knows when people need more support than they are willing to admit." His phrasing struck me, the casual certainty that professionals knew better than I did about my own capacity. "Situations like mine," I repeated. "What situation is that exactly? Living alone? Being over 60? Having a son who worries?" The silence stretched long enough that I thought he might have hung up. Then he spoke again, his tone shifting towards something that sounded rehearsed. "I talked to Diane after you sent that email. She said resistance to care is common, especially in early stages of decline. She recommended we proceed with the assessment process regardless of your cooperation for your own protection." The words landed like ice water. Regardless of your cooperation, for your own protection. Legal language masquerading as concern. "Michael, listen to me carefully. I am not in decline. I am managing my life successfully. If you try to force me into a facility against my will, you will destroy our relationship. Is that what you want?" He was quiet again, then said something that hurt more than anger would have. "I am trying to prevent a crisis before it happens. If you cannot see that, maybe Diane is right about your judgment." He ended the call before I could respond, leaving me standing in the dimming kitchen with my heart pounding against my ribs. I sat at the table and added notes to my documentation. Date, time, exact phrasing Michael had used. The shift from concern to coercion felt sudden, but reviewing my notes showed it had been building for weeks. Each conversation had moved incrementally toward where we were now. Small steps I had not recognized as a path until I was already on it. Tuesday brought a letter from Cedar Heights. Formal business correspondence addressed to me but clearly generated by Diane's office. "Following your initial assessment, we have scheduled a comprehensive evaluation for November 30th at 2 p.m. This evaluation will include cognitive screening, physical assessment, and care planning consultation. Please bring current medications and medical records. Failure to attend may impact future placement availability." I read the letter 3 times, anger building with each pass. I had not agreed to comprehensive evaluation. My email had explicitly declined further assessment. Yet here was an appointment scheduled as if my refusal had never happened, with language suggesting consequences for non-compliance. I called Cedar Heights directly, navigating their phone system until I reached the administrative office. "This is Eleanor Morrison. I received a letter scheduling an evaluation I did not request. I need to cancel it." The receptionist's voice remained professionally pleasant. "Let me pull up your file. Yes, I see the appointment. It was scheduled by Diane Fletcher, your care coordinator. To cancel, you would need her authorization." The phrasing was deliberate. Your care coordinator. as if that relationship existed by my choice rather than being imposed. "I do not have a care coordinator," I said, keeping my voice level with effort. "I never authorized Diane Fletcher to coordinate anything. I want this appointment canceled." The receptionist clicked keys, the sound carrying through the phone. "I am showing notes here that you were assessed as requiring care coordination due to family concerns about independent living capacity. The evaluation is part of our standard protocol. If you have questions about the process, I can transfer you to Diane's office." I declined the transfer and ended the call, understanding that direct approach would not work. The system Diane represented operated through procedures that assumed authority over me regardless of my consent. Fighting within that system meant playing by rules designed to produce predetermined outcomes. I needed different leverage. That afternoon I called Dr. Patterson, my primary care physician for 12 years. His office scheduled an appointment for Thursday, noting I wanted to discuss independent living capacity. When Thursday came, I dressed again for credibility, bringing my medication organizer and the notebook documenting everything that had happened. Dr. Patterson was 68 himself, sharp-eyed and direct in ways I appreciated. "Diane Fletcher from County Services has been suggesting I need residential care," I explained after preliminaries. "She scheduled assessments I did not request. I need documentation from you that I am competent to make my own medical decisions and live independently." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in thought. "Have you experienced any changes in memory, confusion, difficulty managing daily tasks?" I walked him through my routine with specifics. Medications taken on schedule using the organizer. Bills paid automatically or manually on time. Groceries purchased weekly from a list. Social activities with Rita and 2 other friends. Driving limited to familiar routes in daylight, a choice I made for safety, not necessity. He listened without interrupting, then conducted brief cognitive screening. Clock drawing, word recall, sequence tasks. I completed everything without difficulty. "Eleanor, based on this visit and your medical history, you show no signs of cognitive impairment or incapacity," he said, making notes in my chart. "You are managing chronic conditions appropriately. I see no medical reason you cannot continue living independently. I will document this in your records and provide you a letter if needed for any legal proceedings." The relief was physical, tension releasing from shoulders I had not realized were hunched. "Thank you. Can you send a copy to Diane Fletcher at County Services?" He nodded, though his expression suggested concern about something beyond the medical. "I can do that. But Eleanor, understand that medical capacity is only one factor in these situations. If your son has legal authority or convinces a court you need guardianship, my letter may not be enough to prevent placement." His words introduced new fear. Guardianship. Legal authority over my person and property, stripping away autonomy through court process. "Michael would not do that," I said, but the certainty in my voice was hollow. 2 weeks ago, I would have said Michael would not schedule assessments behind my back or tell me my judgment was impaired. I no longer knew what he would or would not do. Dr. Patterson gave me the letter before I left. Medical letterhead stating clearly that I possessed decision-making capacity and could safely maintain independent living. I drove home with the document in my purse, evidence that felt both essential and insufficient. Medical competence did not protect against being worn down by relentless institutional pressure. Friday afternoon, Rita came over with groceries and determination. "We are making a plan," she announced, unpacking items into my refrigerator. "Not reacting, planning. What do you need to secure your position?" We sat at the kitchen table with coffee and the notebook I had been keeping, laying out concrete steps. Documentation from Dr. Patterson, check. Next was financial review to ensure no one could claim I was mismanaging money. I pulled bank statements and bills going back 6 months, spreading them across the table. Everything was in order. Rent paid consistently, utilities current, no overdrafts or missed payments, credit cards maintained at low balances. Rita photographed each statement with her phone, creating backups I could access if original documents disappeared. "What about legal advice?" she asked. "Do you know an attorney?" I did not. Legal services felt expensive and beyond my reach, though I knew that thinking was exactly what people like Diane counted on. Rita pulled out her phone, searching for elder law attorneys in Portland. "There are free consultations. Let me make some calls." Within an hour, she had scheduled 3 appointments for the following week, telling each office briefly about the situation. When she left that evening, I felt less alone than I had in weeks, though the underlying dread remained. The weekend passed slowly. Each hour waited with anticipation of Monday's scheduled evaluation I had no intention of attending. Sunday evening, I drafted another email to Diane, this one more formal. "I am writing to confirm that I will not be attending the November 30th evaluation at Cedar Heights. As stated previously, I have not requested assessment and do not consent to care coordination. Please remove me from your active case list." I sent copies to Michael and to the Cedar Heights Administrative Office, creating a paper trail that might matter if this escalated legally. Michael did not respond, his silence more unsettling than argument would have been. Monday morning came gray and cold, rain giving way to early snow that would not stick but transformed the city into something unfamiliar. I stayed home, half expecting someone to knock on my door when I failed to appear at Cedar Heights. No one came. But Tuesday brought a certified letter requiring signature, thick envelope from the county office. Inside was a notice of care coordination proceedings, legal language stating that based on reported concerns about my welfare, the county was initiating formal review of my living situation. A hearing was scheduled for December 15th. I was entitled to representation and could present evidence supporting independent living capability. Failure to appear would result in default judgment. The letter transformed everything from interpersonal conflict to legal proceeding. I called the first attorney on Rita's list, explaining the situation in words that came out more panicked than I intended. The receptionist put me through to Sarah Chen, elder law specialist, who listened to my entire story without interrupting. "They are using Adult Protective Services statutes," she said finally, "designed to protect vulnerable adults from neglect or exploitation. But they can be weaponized to force people into institutional care against their will." She agreed to represent me, fees reduced because of my financial situation. We scheduled a meeting for Thursday to review all documentation and prepare for the hearing. "Bring everything," she instructed. "Medical records, financial statements, your notebook, any communication from your son or Diane Fletcher. We need to show you are not vulnerable, not being exploited, and fully capable of making informed decisions about your care." "Wednesday," Michael finally called. His voice sounded tired, strained in ways that might have moved me if I was not so angry. "Mom, I did not want it to go this far. But you are being unreasonable. Diane said the county had to get involved because you are refusing necessary care. If you would just cooperate, we could avoid court." I closed my eyes, forcing myself to breathe evenly before responding. "I am not refusing necessary care. I am refusing unnecessary institutionalization. There is a difference, Michael. Why can you not see that?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I am scared, okay? I am scared something will happen to you and I will have failed you the way I failed Dad." The words pierced through my anger to something underneath, old grief we had never fully processed. His father had died suddenly of a heart attack, found by neighbors after lying on the floor for hours. Michael had been away on business, unreachable, arriving home to police and paramedics and his father already gone. "You did not fail your father," I said softly. "And I am not your father. I am here, alive, capable. You cannot prevent every possible crisis by locking me away." But even as I said it, I knew the conversation would not change his mind. Fear was driving him. Fear that made institutional care look like protection rather than prison. We ended the call without resolution, the distance between us wider than the 15 miles separating our homes. Thursday's meeting with Sarah Chen lasted 3 hours. We reviewed every document, building a case that presented me as competent, financially stable, medically sound, and actively engaged in my own care. She explained the hearing process, what questions I should expect, how the county would frame their argument. "They will focus on risk," she said. "What could go wrong if you continue living alone? Our job is to show that risk exists for everyone, and managing risk does not require institutionalization." She also warned me about costs beyond legal fees. "Even if we win, this will damage your relationship with your son. He genuinely believes he is protecting you. That belief is not going to change just because a judge rules against the county." Her honesty was harder to hear than false reassurance would have been. I was fighting for my autonomy at the price of connection with the only family I had left. The days before the hearing blurred together, each one heavy with preparation and dread. Rita helped me organize outfits that projected competence without looking defensive. Dr. Patterson provided additional documentation at Sarah's request. I practiced answering questions in front of my bathroom mirror, trying to sound confident rather than afraid. December 15th arrived with the kind of cold that made everything brittle. The hearing was held in a county office building, in a small windowless room that smelled of old carpet and fluorescent lights. Diane was there with a county attorney. Michael sat on their side of the room, not meeting my eyes. Sarah sat beside me, professional and calm in ways I could not access. The county attorney presented first, outlining concerns about my living situation. Isolated housing with safety hazards. Limited social support. Age-related vulnerabilities, history of medication management errors. Each point was technically accurate but framed to suggest crisis where none existed. Michael testified briefly, his voice breaking as he described finding his father dead and his terror of experiencing that again with me. Then Sarah presented our case, Dr. Patterson's letter and testimony via phone. My financial record showing competent management. Letters from Rita and other friends describing regular social contact. Photographs of my apartment showing a clean, organized space without safety hazards. My own testimony answering questions about daily living activities, future planning, support systems I had in place. The hearing officer, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and tired expression, listened to everything. Then she asked me directly, "Mrs. Morrison, do you understand that your son is motivated by love and concern? That he genuinely believes institutional care would protect you?" I met her gaze steadily. "Yes, I understand that. But love does not give him the right to make decisions for me that I am capable of making myself. I am 66, not 6. I deserve autonomy over my own life." She nodded slowly, making notes I could not read. "I will issue a ruling within 7 business days. You will receive notification by mail." The hearing ended, procedural and anticlimactic given the stakes. Michael left quickly, still not looking at me. Diane approached Sarah with a business card, offering to coordinate ongoing monitoring if the ruling went in my favor. Sarah declined politely, her professional smile never wavering. Outside, waiting for Rita to pick me up, I stood in falling snow and felt the full weight of what I had done. I had defied my son, challenged the system meant to protect people like me, risked everything on the belief that I knew myself better than others did. And now I had to wait 7 days to learn if that belief was enough. The ruling arrived on December 23rd, 6 days after the hearing, delivered in a standard white envelope with county seal pressed into the corner. My hands shook opening it, Rita standing beside me in my kitchen where everything felt suspended until I knew. The letter was brief, legal language condensed to 2 paragraphs. The county found insufficient evidence to justify involuntary care coordination or institutional placement. I retained full decision-making authority over my living situation. Case closed, subject to reopening if circumstances materially changed. I read it twice before the words penetrated, relief flooding through me so intensely I had to sit down. Rita squeezed my shoulder, her smile fierce with vindication. "You won," she said simply. But winning felt hollow when I looked at my phone. No messages from Michael. No acknowledgement that the hearing had happened or that I had been right to resist. The victory was mine, but the cost was becoming clearer with each silent day. Christmas passed in strange quiet. I had always spent it at Michael's house, cooking dishes his father had loved, watching him open gifts, preserving traditions that connected us to someone gone. This year, no invitation came. I called him Christmas Eve, the phone ringing 8 times before going to voicemail. "Michael, it is Mom. I know you are hurt. I know you think I made the wrong choice. But I need you to understand I am still here. Still your mother. Still the person who loves you. Please call me back." He did not. Christmas Day, I ate leftover soup and watched snow fall outside my window, the apartment feeling smaller than it ever had. Rita invited me to her daughter's house, kind gesture I declined because accepting would mean admitting Michael had abandoned me. I was not ready for that admission yet, still clinging to hope that silence was temporary, that he needed time to process what had happened. New Year came with the same emptiness, time marked without celebration. I began 2024 with resolutions I could control, maintain routines that proved my competence, document everything in case proceedings resumed, rebuild life around the autonomy I had fought for, even if that autonomy felt lonelier than I expected. January's cold settled over Portland, ice forming on sidewalks I navigated carefully, aware that one fall could restart everything I had stopped. Mid-January brought a different kind of letter, this one from Cedar Heights directly. "We are writing to inform you of updated admission policies. Due to increased demand for services, we are implementing a waitlist system for residential placement. Should you wish to reconsider care options in the future, we recommend submitting an application now to preserve your position." The timing felt calculated, reminder that the system I had rejected remained available, waiting for me to fail. I threw the letter away, then retrieved it from the trash an hour later, filing it with other documentation. Sarah had warned me that even closed cases left paper trails institutions could reference. Maintaining records was not paranoia. It was pragmatism born from learning how systems operated when you challenged them. Every piece of correspondence was potential evidence in future proceedings I hoped would never come but could not assume away. February marked 3 months since the hearing. 3 months of silence from Michael, broken only by a text message on my birthday. "Happy birthday, Mom. Hope you are well." 12 words stripped of warmth or connection, acknowledgement of obligation without actual engagement. I responded with gratitude I did not entirely feel, keeping the door open even as I recognized he had no intention of walking through it. Rita noticed the toll isolation was taking, suggesting I join a community group she had found through the library. It is for women over 50 book club mixed with social activities. You need people beyond me. Her assessment was accurate if painful. I had built my social life narrowly, Michael and Rita and a few friends I saw occasionally. Losing Michael left a gap activities could not fill, but I agreed to try, needing something to structure weeks that blurred together. The group met Tuesday evenings in the library's community room. 15 women ranging from early 50s to late 70s discussing books I sometimes remembered to read. More valuable than the books was the conversation afterward. Coffee and cookies while women shared pieces of their lives. Several were widows like me. Others were divorced or never married, navigating later years with varying degrees of grace and struggle. I listened more than I spoke, learning I was not unique in feeling invisible. One woman, Barbara, had fought off her daughter's attempts to move her into assisted living 5 years ago. "She still thinks I made a mistake," Barbara said over coffee one evening. "She checks on me constantly, waiting for proof she was right. I love her, but I had to choose between being her project and being myself. You cannot be both." Her words resonated with painful clarity, naming the choice I was living even if I had not articulated it that way. March brought unexpected complication. I tripped on a raised section of sidewalk near my apartment, catching myself on a parking meter before falling completely. My knee twisted badly, immediate pain sharp enough to make me gasp. I limped back to my apartment, ice and elevation reducing swelling but not eliminating the deep ache that persisted for days. I did not tell Michael, did not seek medical attention beyond over-the-counter pain medication, aware that any documentation of injury could be weaponized as evidence of declining physical capacity. The knee improved slowly, weeks of careful movement before I trusted it fully. But the incident scared me in ways I had not expected, not because of the injury itself, but because of how my first thought had been covering it up rather than seeking appropriate care. I was making decisions based on how they might be perceived, how they might be used against me rather than what was actually best for my health. That realization felt like losing ground I had fought to hold. Rita noticed the limp I tried to hide and confronted me directly. "What happened?" I explained about the sidewalk, the decision not to see a doctor. She listened with growing frustration. "Eleanor, you cannot live like this. You cannot avoid medical care because you are afraid of giving them ammunition. That is letting them win in a different way." Her anger came from concern, but it stung because she was right. I had traded one form of control for another kind of compromise. April's rains washed away the last of winter, Portland greening in ways that usually lifted my spirits. This year, the season change felt neutral. Beauty I observed without fully experiencing. I went through motions of living independently, proving to no one in particular that I could, but the joy had drained from ordinary tasks. Cooking for one person, reading books alone, maintaining an apartment no one visited. Independence I had fought for felt increasingly like isolation I had chosen. The book club became my anchor, Tuesday evenings where conversation filled space that echoed the rest of the week. I contributed more as months passed, sharing carefully edited versions of my situation. The women listened without judgment, several nodding in recognition of dynamics they had experienced. "The system assumes care and control are the same thing," one woman said. "They cannot imagine you might need the first without accepting the second." In May, I made a decision that felt both small and significant. I adopted a cat from the shelter, orange tabby named Chester, who had been there 6 months because older cats were harder to place. He settled into my apartment with immediate authority, claiming the reading chair and demanding dinner precisely at 6. His presence changed the space, made it feel less empty even when I was alone. Rita laughed when she met him. "You got a roommate who cannot testify against you." Chester's arrival coincided with another letter from Michael, actual handwritten note rather than text message. "Mom, I have been thinking a lot about what happened. I am not ready to talk yet, but I want you to know I do not hate you. I just do not understand your choices. Maybe someday I will. Take care of yourself." The note was not reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement. Slight thaw in frozen silence that had lasted 5 months. I wrote back immediately, keeping my response brief. I love you. I miss you. When you are ready to talk, I am here. I mailed it before I could overthink the words, then sat with Chester in my lap, his purring a comfort that required nothing beyond presence. The note did not change anything material, but it shifted something internal. Small allowance that maybe complete rupture was not inevitable. June brought Dr. Patterson's annual physical appointment I scheduled deliberately to maintain documentation of ongoing health management. He examined the knee I had injured in March, now healed but slightly weaker than before. You should have come in when this happened, he said not unkindly. Delayed treatment can complicate recovery. I explained my hesitation, the fear that any medical issue would restart proceedings. He listened, then spoke carefully. Eleanor, I understand your concern, but you cannot let fear of the system prevent you from taking care of yourself. That becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They claim you cannot manage your health, so you avoid medical care, which actually does compromise your health. You see the problem? I did see it, the trap I had built trying to avoid different trap. What do I do? I asked. How do I protect myself without actually harming myself? He thought for a moment. Document everything. Come in for regular checkups, address issues promptly, follow treatment plans. Create a record that shows active health management, not avoidance. If they try again, you will have evidence you are handling your care responsibly. His advice was practical, reframing medical appointments from potential threats to protective shields. I left with renewed commitment to managing my health openly rather than fearfully. July heat settled over Portland, temperatures climbing into the 90s without the air conditioning most older buildings lacked. My apartment became stifling, sleep difficult in humid nights that barely cooled. I spent afternoons at the library, its climate control and quiet more appealing than home. Chester adapted by sleeping in the bathtub, coolest spot available. I worried about him during work hours when I left for errands, but Rita assured me cats were resilient, better at heat management than humans. One particularly brutal afternoon, the library closed early for electrical repairs. I walked home slowly, heat radiating from pavement in waves that made breathing difficult. Climbing the 12 stairs to my apartment felt monumental, my heart pounding by the time I reached the top. Inside was no better, air thick and motionless. I lay on the couch with ice water and a wet cloth, Chester pressed against me despite the heat, both of us enduring. The experience shook me more than it should have, body reminding me of vulnerabilities I preferred to ignore. I was 66, managing chronic conditions that made heat dangerous. My apartment's lack of air conditioning, charming in spring and fall, became liability in summer. I could not afford to install central air, and window units were prohibited by lease terms I had never questioned. For the first time, I understood how circumstances could shift from manageable to impossible without dramatic change. Just incremental challenges that accumulated. Rita found me that evening, still on the couch, Chester now occupying the bathroom sink. You need to come stay with me when it is this hot, she said, voice firm. I have air conditioning. You have stubbornness. Guess which one is more useful right now? I resisted initially, independence asserting itself even when counterproductive. But she persisted, and finally I agreed to spend the next 3 nights at her house until temperatures moderated. Her guest room was cool and quiet, sleep coming easier than it had in days. But lying in someone else's space, dependent on their hospitality, triggered anxiety I could not fully explain. This was what Michael had wanted, me accepting help, admitting I could not manage alone. Except Rita's help was freely offered, not imposed. I could leave whenever I chose. The difference mattered, though I struggled to articulate why accepting care from friend felt different than accepting it from institution or son. By August, heat had broken. Portland returning to mild temperatures that made my apartment comfortable again. I resumed normal routines, book club and groceries and doctor appointments documenting ongoing health management. Life had achieved strange equilibrium, not what I imagined independence would feel like, but sustainable in ways that counted. I was managing, proving daily that I could, even if the validation was primarily for myself. Late August brought the moment I had been dreading without consciously acknowledging. I was sorting mail, bills, and catalogs and meaningless advertisements when an envelope with Michael's return address stopped me. Inside was an invitation to his wedding, formal card announcing his marriage to someone named Jennifer Caldwell on October 12th. I had not known he was dating seriously, let alone engaged. The invitation felt like notification rather than welcome, my name printed without personal note or explanation. I sat at the kitchen table holding the card, Chester winding between my legs in concern for distress he could sense but not understand. Michael was getting married and had not told me, had not introduced me to the woman who would become my daughter-in-law, had excluded me from engagement and planning and every step that should have included his mother. The invitation was technically inclusion, but it confirmed how completely he had removed me from his life. Rita found me there an hour later. Tears dried on my face, the invitation still in my hands. She read it without comment, then sat beside me in silence that acknowledged there were no comforting words. "Are you going to go?" she asked finally. I did not know. Attending meant witnessing life he had built without me, accepting that I was guest at celebration, not participant. Not attending meant confirming the rupture between us, choosing absence over uncomfortable presence. I RSVP'd yes, single guest where the card allowed +1 I did not have. Then I called Sarah Chen, asking if Michael's marriage affected any legal standing regarding future care decisions. She was quiet for a long moment before responding. Potentially. If he and his wife both express concerns about your capacity, that could strengthen any future petition for guardianship. You have a spouse now becomes he and Jennifer jointly. Just something to be aware of. Her words introduced new fear I had not considered. Michael's marriage was not just personal development. It was potential realignment of forces that might move against me. A wife who had never known me might accept his narrative without question, become ally in future attempts to control my life. I was building scenarios that might never materialize, but after everything that had happened, paranoia felt like reasonable precaution. September meant preparing for a wedding I dreaded attending, finding appropriate dress and gift that communicated happiness I did not entirely feel. The book club women offered advice and support, several having navigated similar estrangements from adult children. "Go with your head up," Barbara said. "You did nothing wrong by defending your autonomy. Do not apologize for that with your presence or your posture." October 12th arrived crisp and clear, fall colors at peak, perfect wedding weather. I drove to the venue alone, small vineyard outside Portland that specialized in events. Parking was full of cars I did not recognize, guests from Michael's life I had no access to. I walked to the ceremony space in dress I had chosen carefully, neither too formal nor too casual, trying to project confidence I did not feel. Michael stood at the altar with groomsmen I did not know, his face happy in ways I had not seen in years. Jennifer was lovely, blonde and poised, smiling at guests who approached. I sat in the back row, declined offer to move closer to family seating. The ceremony was brief, traditional vows spoken clearly. I watched my son marry a stranger, feeling more alone than I had felt even in months of actual solitude. The reception was harder. Michael and Jennifer greeted guests, working the room with practiced ease. When they reached me, Michael's smile held, but his eyes were guarded. "Mom, this is Jennifer. Jennifer, this is my mother, Eleanor." Jennifer's greeting was polite but distant, handshake brief. "Thank you for coming," she said, already looking past me to the next guest. They moved on quickly, duty discharged, leaving me standing with a glass of wine I was not drinking. Rita arrived then, unexpected and wonderful. "You did not tell me you were coming," I said, surprised into actual smile. She shrugged. "I am your +1. You should not do this alone." We sat together at a table far from the family section, eating dinner and making quiet observations about floral arrangements and music choices, participating without truly belonging. When the formal dances started, father-daughter and mother-son Michael danced with Jennifer's mother, not me. The absence was noticed, whispered about by guests who did not know our story. I left before the reception ended, Rita driving me home in comfortable silence. In my apartment, Chester greeted me with his usual indifference that somehow felt comforting. I changed out of the dress I would never wear again, hanging it in the back of the closet with other artifacts of a life that had ended without my permission. Rita stayed long enough to make sure I was okay, then left me with the quiet I had chosen and the solitude I was learning to inhabit. That night I sat at my kitchen table with the notebook I had been keeping since November, reading through months of documentation. The hearing I had won, the silence I had endured, the wedding I had attended as stranger. I had fought for autonomy and achieved it, remained in my apartment with my choices intact. But the cost was clearer now than it had been in the moment of fighting. I had won my independence by losing my son, trade-off that felt increasingly like choosing between two kinds of losing. Chester jumped onto the table, disrupting my papers, demanding attention with insistence that did not allow wallowing. I stroked his fur, grateful for his uncomplicated presence, and made a decision that had been forming for weeks. I was not going to spend whatever years I had left proving to Michael I had been right. I was going to build a life that felt worth protecting, community and purpose beyond simply maintaining independence. If he eventually wanted back in, the door would be open, but I would not wait frozen, hoping for reconciliation that might never come. November came again, 1 year since the paperwork on Michael's counter had started everything. I marked the anniversary quietly, noting it in the journal I still kept but no longer needed for legal protection. The documentation had become something else, record of how I had changed rather than evidence for proceedings that had not resumed. A year of living deliberately, proving nothing to anyone except myself. The book club had evolved into actual friendships, women I saw beyond Tuesday evenings. Barbara and I met for coffee weekly, comparing notes on aging without apology. Another woman, Susan, recruited me to volunteer at the library's literacy program, tutoring adults learning to read. The work was humbling and rewarding in ways I had not anticipated, using skills I had forgotten I possessed. My calendar filled with commitments that were mine, chosen rather than imposed. Chester had settled into routines that structured my days. Morning feeding followed by his extended grooming session while I drank coffee. Evening ritual of sitting together on the couch, his purring a metronome measuring time that passed comfortably rather than anxiously. Rita joked that I had become a cat lady, observation I accepted without defensiveness. Worse things to be than someone who found companionship where it was available. Dr. Patterson's December checkup showed stable vitals, chronic conditions managed appropriately. "You are doing well," he said, reviewing numbers that documented health maintained through attention rather than avoided through fear. "Whatever changes you made this year, they are working." I did not correct his assumption that I had made positive changes. Surviving what had been done to me was not the same as thriving, but the outcome looked similar enough in medical charts. Christmas approached with the same dread as the previous year, anticipation of silence that had become familiar if not comfortable. But mid-December brought unexpected text from Michael. Jennifer and I would like to invite you to Christmas dinner. 6 p.m. our place. Let me know if you can come. The message was formal, stripped of warmth, but it was invitation rather than absence. I stared at the text for 10 minutes before responding with simple acceptance. Christmas Day, I dressed carefully, bringing wine and the homemade cookies Michael had always loved. Their house was decorated with professional restraint, white lights and silver ornaments that looked expensive and impersonal. Jennifer answered the door, her smile more genuine than at the wedding but still careful. "Eleanor, please come in. Michael is finishing dinner." She took my coat and the wine, leading me to a living room I had never seen before, their life built in spaces I had not been invited to witness. Michael emerged from the kitchen, apron over dress shirt, his expression complex in ways I could not read. "Mom, thank you for coming." We stood awkwardly until Jennifer suggested drinks, breaking tension with practiced hospitality. Over wine and conversation about neutral topics, weather and Portland traffic and upcoming holiday plans, I watched my son and his wife navigate their relationship, comfortable with each other in ways that excluded me not maliciously, but naturally. Dinner was elaborate, courses Michael had clearly worked hard to prepare. We talked about his job, Jennifer's work in marketing, the house they had bought in September. I shared carefully edited updates about the book club and library volunteering, presenting life that sounded full without revealing the loneliness underneath. No one mentioned the hearing or the year of silence, the wedge between us acknowledged through avoidance rather than discussion. After dessert, Jennifer excused herself to take a phone call, leaving Michael and me alone for the first time. He cleared plates with focused attention, giving himself task rather than conversation. I helped despite his protest, carrying dishes to the kitchen where we worked in silence that felt heavier than words. Finally, standing at the sink, he spoke without looking at me. "I am sorry for how things happened last year. I thought I was protecting you. I did not understand I was hurting you instead." The apology landed with weight I had not expected. Simple words that acknowledged what had occurred between us. "I know you were scared," I said carefully. "I know you were trying to help. But Michael, you have to understand that taking away my choices was not help. It was control disguised as care." He nodded slowly, hands still in dishwater. "I know that now. Jennifer helped me see it. She pointed out that I was treating you like a problem to solve rather than a person to trust." We stood together at the sink, washing dishes in his expensive house, rebuilding something that had broken. Not back to what it was that was impossible, but towards something new. Connection that accepted distance and damage and the reality that we saw each other differently than before. "Can we try again?" he asked finally. Not like before. Just, "Can we try?" I reached over and squeezed his shoulder, the gesture small but real. "Yes, we can try." The rest of the evening passed with lighter conversation, Jennifer rejoining us with story about her family's holiday chaos. When I left at 9, Michael hugged me at the door, brief but genuine first physical contact we had shared in over a year. Driving home through Portland streets decorated for Christmas, I felt something that might have been hope, cautious and complicated but present. January brought new rhythm, monthly dinners with Michael and Jennifer that were sometimes awkward but gradually less so. Jennifer turned out to be thoughtful in ways I had not expected, asking questions about my life that suggested actual interest rather than polite obligation. She had her own complicated relationship with her mother, understanding from different angle what family rupture felt like and how hard rebuilding was. One evening in February, Jennifer asked about the hearing, the topic we had all avoided. Michael tensed immediately, but she pressed gently. "I want to understand what happened, not to take sides, just to understand." I explained carefully, walking through events without assigning blame even when blame was warranted. She listened without interrupting, then said something that surprised me. That sounds terrifying. Having people make decisions about your life without your input. I would have fought too. Michael's expression shifted, some internal calculation adjusting. I did not think about it that way, he said slowly. I was so focused on preventing crisis that I created a different kind of crisis. I made you the problem instead of listening to what you were saying. The conversation was not absolution or complete understanding, but it was acknowledgement, willingness to see my perspective even if he did not fully agree. Spring arrived with cherry blossoms transforming Portland into brief pink glory. The book club planned outing to the Japanese garden, afternoon of walking paths and photographing flowers blooming in disciplined beauty. I went with Barbara and Susan, spending hours in careful landscape that demonstrated how structure and wildness could coexist. Standing by the koi pond, watching fish navigate water with ancient patience, I felt something settle inside me. Acceptance of where I was rather than grief for where I was not. In April, Rita was diagnosed with breast cancer, early stage but requiring surgery and treatment. The news reoriented everything, my concerns suddenly trivial compared to her actual crisis. I accompanied her to appointments, took notes when doctors provided information too complex to absorb in moment, sat with her through chemotherapy sessions that left her exhausted. The role reversal was strange and necessary, opportunity to return support she had given me through my worst year. One afternoon, waiting for her treatment to finish, I reflected on how thoroughly my life had reorganized around relationships I had built rather than ones I had been born into. Rita and the book club women, the literacy students who struggled through lessons with determination I admired, even Chester with his demanding affection. Family was not just blood, it was the people who showed up, who saw you completely and chose presence anyway. Rita recovered slowly through summer, energy returning in increments. By August, she was back to her usual self, hair growing back in gray curls she decided not to color. I earned these, she said, examining herself in mirror. Her illness had clarified things for both of us, understanding that time was not infinite, that relationships required tending, that crisis could arrive without warning and reshape everything. September brought another letter from Cedar Heights, marketing material rather than legal threat. Explore your options for vibrant senior living. The glossy brochure showed active seniors engaged in activities that looked simultaneously appealing and staged. I read through it with detachment, no longer threatened by what it represented. If I ever needed care beyond what I could manage, I would make that decision myself, on my timeline, without coercion. The difference between choosing and being chosen for mattered more than the outcome. October marked 2 years since the hearing. I noted the date without ceremony, milestone that measured survival rather than celebration. My apartment lease was up for renewal. I signed for another year, committing to space I had fought to keep. The stairs were still only 12 steps, manageable if I took them carefully. The lack of air conditioning was a problem I had solved with window fans in Rita's guest room during heat waves. Imperfect solutions to imperfect situation, which described most of life accurately. Michael and Jennifer invited me to Thanksgiving, first major holiday where I felt like guest rather than intruder. Jennifer's parents were there, her siblings and their children, house full of noise and movement that was overwhelming and wonderful. I helped with dishes, played with children who called me Mrs. Morrison in polite voices, occupied space at the margins of someone else's family. It was not what I had imagined aging would look like, but it was connection. Something built from wreckage of what had broken. December brought unexpected news. Michael and Jennifer were expecting a baby due in May. Michael told me over coffee, just the two of us, his excitement mixed with visible nervousness about my reaction. "I want you to be part of this," he said carefully. "Part of the baby's life. But I need to know you understand that Jennifer and I will make decisions about our family. I cannot have conflict about parenting like we had conflict about your care." His words were fair, boundaries stated clearly rather than assumed. "I understand," I said, meaning it. "I will be whatever kind of grandmother you want me to be. Involved or peripheral, present or occasional. You get to decide that, not me." Relief crossed his face, some fear released. We spent the next hour discussing names and nursery colors and all the ordinary preparations that came with new life. Conversation that felt normal in ways I had stopped expecting. Christmas that year was quieter. Just the three of us, Jennifer tired from pregnancy. Michael attentive in ways that suggested he would be good father. I brought gifts for the baby. Tiny clothes that seemed impossibly small. Practical items the parenting books recommended. We ate simple dinner and watched old movies, comfortable silence punctuated by conversation that did not require effort. Driving home that night, I felt something close to peace, acceptance that this was enough, that enough was actually adequate. January brought the literacy program's annual celebration. Students who had progressed through levels receiving certificates. I sat in the audience watching adults my age and younger cross the stage, holding documentation of achievement that represented hours of struggle and determination. My student Marcus, 58 and learning to read after a lifetime of hiding illiteracy, gave speech about how books had opened worlds he had not known existed. I cried watching him, proud in ways that surprised me. The book club continued meeting, but we had evolved beyond books into something closer to support group. We talked about aging bodies that betrayed us, adult children who meant well but did not understand, systems that treated us as problems requiring solutions. But we also talked about joys specific to this life stage, freedom from others' expectations, clarity about what mattered, relationships chosen rather than obligated. Barbara said what we all felt. "I like who I am now better than who I was at 40. I just wish my knees agreed." February brought Michael and Jennifer to my apartment for first time since everything had happened. They brought takeout and curiosity, walking through space that was thoroughly mine. Chester permitted their presence with regal tolerance, allowing Jennifer to pet him briefly before returning to his chair. They stayed 2 hours, eating at my small table, examining photographs on my mantel, inhabiting my space without judgment. After they left, I sat in the lingering evidence of their visit. Takeout containers I had not thrown away yet, feeling like something had been restored, not to original state but to functional new configuration. March came with news that Rita was cancer-free. 5-year mark reached without recurrence. We celebrated with the book club, champagne and cake in the library's community room after hours. Rita gave speech about surviving not just cancer but aging, loss, all the accumulated weight of living past 60. "We are still here," she said, raising her glass. "That is worth celebrating." We toasted survival, resilience, stubborn refusal to disappear quietly. April brought spring again, 3rd cycle since the hearing, seasons marking time that had passed. I was 68 now. Age that had seemed distant when I was fighting to remain in my apartment. The fight felt both recent and impossibly far away, something that had happened to a person I still was but had also moved beyond. I had learned things I wished I had not needed to learn, about how systems operated, how care could become weapon, how defending yourself cost more than staying silent but less than complete erasure. May arrived with Michael and Jennifer's baby, girl they named Sarah after Jennifer's grandmother. I met her in the hospital, tiny person wrapped in hospital blanket, face peaceful in newborn sleep. Michael placed her in my arms carefully, trusting me with his child in ways that meant more than words. I held my granddaughter and felt the full weight of everything that had brought us to this moment: rupture and repair and the messy work of staying in each other's lives despite damage. Over the following weeks, I learned the rhythm of being grandmother on Michael's terms. Scheduled visits rather than spontaneous, helping when asked rather than assuming need, respecting boundaries that protected their family while allowing my inclusion. It was not the role I had imagined, but it was real connection that acknowledged past while building toward different future. Chester adapted to the baby's occasional presence with his usual superiority, observing Sarah from safe distance, claiming toys she could not yet use. Rita joked that I now had two beings dependent on me, cat and granddaughter, neither particularly grateful. The observation was accurate and made me laugh in ways that felt like full breathing, joy uncomplicated by fear or defensive posturing. June brought performance review of sorts, not formal but internal. 3 years since the paperwork on Michael's counter, 2.5 years since the hearing. Time measured in how I had rebuilt rather than what I had lost. I was still in my apartment, still independent, still making decisions about my life without institutional interference. But I was also connected, part of community I had actively built, relationships that sustained me through ordinary days and potential crises. Dr. Patterson's June checkup showed what he called remarkable stability for someone my age. Blood pressure managed, chronic conditions monitored, no cognitive decline, physical capability appropriate for 68. "Whatever you are doing, keep doing it," he said, updating charts that documented my continued competence. I thought about telling him that what I was doing was simply living, but he probably knew that already. The book club met in July to plan fall programming. We had become fixture at the library, our group growing to 20 women, waiting list for new members. Barbara suggested we formalize, create actual organization with stated purpose and structure. "We are providing something people need," she said. "Support for women navigating aging without apology. That deserves recognition." We voted to incorporate filing paperwork that made us legitimate, community organization serving population that rarely got served on their own terms. August brought Cedar Heights closure, the facility shutting down after financial scandal exposed mismanagement and abuse. I read the news coverage with complicated feelings, vindication mixed with sadness for residents who had lived there believing they were safe. The system I had fought against had been worse than I knew, my resistance accidentally protecting me from institution that had harmed others. The randomness of that protection bothered me more than victory satisfied me. September marked 3 years since the hearing. This time I acknowledged the anniversary with deliberate celebration, dinner with Rita and the book club women who had become closest friends. We toasted survival, resilience, the work of building lives that felt worth protecting. Barbara gave speech about how we had all fought different battles with aging, independence, visibility, and how community had made those battles survivable even when we lost individual skirmishes. October brought first frost, Portland preparing for winter. I stocked my apartment with supplies learned from previous years: space heater for coldest nights, extra blankets, food that did not require cooking if power failed. Preparing for crisis without being controlled by fear of it, practical distinction I had learned through experience. Chester supervised my preparations with his usual judgment, approving choices that centered his comfort. Michael and Jennifer invited me to Sarah's first Halloween, encouraging me to come in costume. I dressed as book character from Sarah's favorite story, ridiculous outfit that made the baby laugh. We walked the neighborhood together, Sarah in stroller, collecting candy she was too young to eat. Normal family activity, ordinary and best way possible. No discussion of capacity or care needs, just presence, participation, belonging earned through showing up consistently. November came again. 4 years since this all started. The cycle of seasons had repeated enough times that I could see patterns beyond immediate crisis. Life organized itself around manageable routines, relationships that sustained, purpose found in small commitments. I was not the person I had been before Cedar Heights and hearings and year of silence. That person had believed systems would protect her if she followed rules. I knew better now. Knowledge that made me simultaneously more vulnerable and more resilient. Thanksgiving was at Michael and Jennifer's again, their tradition now rather than mine. I brought dishes I had always made, continuity that connected past to present without demanding return to what had been. Sarah sat in high chair, smashing sweet potato and laughing at her own mess. Michael looked at her with love so fierce it was almost painful to witness, understanding in new way what had driven his fear 4 years ago. He had wanted to prevent loss, control outcomes, protect against grief he had experienced too young. None of that excused what he had done, but it explained it, made him human rather than villain. December brought holiday season that felt full rather than empty. Book club party, literacy program celebration, dinner with Michael and Jennifer, visits with Rita, who remained cancer-free and defiant. Chester received gifts from people who loved me, recognition that he was family too. My calendar marked with events I had chosen, life built from deliberate choices rather than default obligations. On New Year's Eve, I sat alone in my apartment, Chester asleep in his chair, reflecting on what 4 years had taught me. That fighting for autonomy cost more than I had anticipated, but less than losing myself would have cost. That family could be rebuilt into new configurations after breaking, though rebuilt was not the same as restored. That independence was not isolation unless you let it be. That community required cultivation. That aging meant losing things but also gaining clarity about what actually mattered. At midnight, fireworks visible from my window, I toasted myself with champagne Rita had brought over. To surviving, I said aloud to Chester, who opened one eye in acknowledgement. To building life worth fighting for. To showing up for yourself when no one else will. The words felt true, hard-earned truth that came from experience rather than assumption. January brought the new year, another cycle beginning. I was 69 now, closer to 70 than I had been to 60 when this started. Time moving forward whether I was ready or not, aging happening regardless of how well I managed or resisted. But I was still here, still choosing, still occupying my own life on my own terms. That was what I had fought for, what I continued to defend, not through dramatic resistance but through daily decisions that added up to autonomy. The book club met on the first Tuesday, planning year ahead. We had goals now, advocacy work with city council about elder housing, partnership with the library to expand programming, outreach to isolated seniors who needed community. Our small group had become something larger, network of women refusing to disappear quietly. Barbara looked around the room full of faces, smiling with satisfaction. "Look at what we built," she said. "Look at who we are." I looked, seeing women I had not known 4 years ago. Connections formed through shared experience of being overlooked, underestimated, systematically dismissed. We had built this together, support system that caught us when institutional systems failed. Not perfect, not solution to everything, but real, sustained by our continued choice to show up for each other. Michael called that evening, routine check-in that had become habit. We talked about Sarah's sleep schedule and the kitchen renovation they were planning, ordinary updates that meant we were in each other's lives. Before hanging up, he said something unexpected. "Mom, I know I do not say this enough, but I am proud of you, for how you handled everything, for not letting us make you into someone you were not." His words surprised tears I had not felt coming. "Thank you," I managed. "That means more than you know." After the call, I sat with Chester, stroking his fur, letting tears come. Not sad tears, not exactly. Release tears, recognition of how far I had come from the morning I found paperwork on Michael's counter. I had survived institutional pressure, legal proceedings, year of silence, rebuilding relationship with my son. I had defended my right to make my own choices and succeeded, though success looked different than I had imagined. February brought the reality I had been avoiding acknowledging. My lease was up again, rent increasing beyond what I could reasonably afford on fixed income. The landlord was renovating, upgrading units, pricing out long-term tenants in favor of younger professionals who could pay more. I had 3 months to decide, renew at higher rate or move somewhere else. The choice was mine. No one was forcing me out, but circumstances were changing in ways that required response. I spent weeks reviewing options with Rita and Sarah Chen, my attorney who had become something like friend. Cheaper apartments in less convenient locations. Senior housing complexes that were not Cedar Heights but still institutional. Staying and managing higher rent by eliminating other expenses. Each option carried trade-offs, none clearly right or wrong. This was what autonomy actually meant, making difficult choices without perfect information, accepting consequences of decisions only I could make. In the end, I decided to move, not to institution but to smaller apartment in building Rita lived in. 1 bedroom instead of 2, fewer stairs, lower rent. Loss of space I had defended so fiercely but chosen loss, strategic retreat rather than forced surrender. I told Michael over coffee, watching his face for reaction that might signal he saw this as vindication. Instead, he asked practical questions about moving logistics, offered to help pack and transport boxes, treated it as normal transition rather than defeat. March was spent packing, sorting through 8 years of accumulated life. I donated books, gave away furniture that would not fit, stripped my apartment down to essentials plus Chester's necessities, which were non-negotiable. The process was emotional in unexpected ways, each discarded item representing piece of life I had lived here. But keeping everything would have meant staying, and staying was no longer wise choice, just stubborn one. Moving day in April, Michael and Jennifer came with truck and energy, helping transfer my reduced belongings to new apartment 3 floors down from Rita. The space was smaller but brighter, western exposure that brought afternoon sun. Chester explored with cautious interest, ultimately approving kitchen window that offered view of bird feeder. Rita brought dinner that evening, the 3 of us eating takeout while Chester supervised unpacking. The new apartment was not my old apartment, would never carry the same meaning. But it was mine, chosen not imposed. Next chapter I was writing rather than having written for me. From the kitchen window I could see Portland stretching toward hills and distance, city I had lived in most of my adult life. Landscape that held my history. I was still here, still part of this place, still making decisions about how and where I lived. May brought Sarah's first birthday. Party at Michael and Jennifer's house, family and friends celebrating milestone. I watched my granddaughter destroy cake with enthusiastic focus, her joy uncomplicated by any awareness of the history that had brought us here. She would never know about the hearing or the silence or what it had cost to remain in her life. That ignorance felt like gift, protection I could offer by carrying weight she would never have to feel. In June, the book club celebrated our 3rd anniversary as formal organization. We had grown to 40 members, provided support to hundreds of women, become recognized voice for elder advocacy in Portland. Local paper ran feature article, photograph showing us gathered at the library, women ranging from 50s to 80s, united by refusal to disappear. Barbara was quoted saying what we all believed. Aging does not mean accepting whatever others decide for you. It means insisting on your own authority until you can no longer hold it yourself. I kept the article, adding it to documentation that had started 4 years ago as legal necessity and became something else, record of how I had changed. The early entries were defensive, scared, focused on protecting myself from others. Later entries showed building rather than defending, creating life rather than just maintaining it. The shift was visible in my own handwriting, confidence growing as I learned to inhabit autonomy I had fought for. July heat came again, but this apartment had air conditioning, building amenity that made summer comfortable rather than dangerous. I thought about the nights I had spent sweating in my old place, too proud to admit struggle, measuring independence by suffering I could endure. Now I accepted that independence sometimes meant different choices, adaptive strategies that acknowledged limitations without surrendering control. August brought unexpected health crisis, minor stroke that landed me in hospital for 3 days. Michael was listed as emergency contact, arrived within an hour, face white with fear that was probably familiar from his father's death. But I was conscious, talking, annoyed more than scared. Doctors said it was warning, wake-up call about managing stress and blood pressure more carefully. Treatment was medication adjustment and lifestyle changes I could implement myself. Control maintained even within medical crisis. Michael visited daily during recovery, bringing Sarah, who had learned to walk and explored my apartment with determined enthusiasm. We did not discuss whether the stroke validated his earlier concerns about my capacity. That conversation would have served no purpose except reopening wounds that had scarred over. Instead, we focused on present recovery plan, what I needed, how he could help without taking over. Rita organized meal train, book club members providing dinners for 2 weeks while I regained strength. The support was overwhelming and necessary, accepting help without feeling diminished by it. This was what community meant, people showing up not because they had to, but because connection obligated them in ways that felt choice rather than burden. I received their care with gratitude that came easier than it would have 4 years ago. September brought full recovery. Dr. Patterson cautiously optimistic about my prognosis with continued medication adherence. "You scared us," he said during follow-up appointment. "But you also showed remarkable resilience. Your recovery was faster than expected for someone your age. Whatever support system you have built, it is working." I thought about telling him that support system had been built from necessity when family system had failed, but that felt like complaint rather than information. October marked 4 years since Michael's wedding, the day that had shown me how completely he had removed me from his life. Now we had dinner monthly, saw each other for holidays, navigated relationship that was complicated but present. The distance between those two realities measured more than time, represented transformation of what connection meant, acceptance that love did not require constant proximity or absence of damage. November brought another anniversary. 5 years since the paperwork on Michael's counter. Half a decade of surviving what that paperwork had started, fighting and rebuilding and learning to live with ambiguity that never fully resolved. I marked the date by writing in journal I still kept, reflecting on accumulation of small choices that added up to life I had not expected but had learned to inhabit. The entry I wrote was not triumphant or bitter, just honest. I fought to stay myself and mostly succeeded. I lost things in the process, connections that could not survive my resistance, illusions about how systems worked and who they protected. But I also gained things, clarity about what mattered, relationships built by choice rather than obligation, understanding of my own resilience. If I could go back and prevent it all from happening, I would. But since I cannot, I accept where the fight brought me. Still here, still choosing, still becoming whoever I am meant to be at 69, 70, however many years I get. That will have to be enough because it is all I have and everything I fought for.